was kidnapped into slavery.
Go boy, you come over here.
He would make us hold up our heads, walk us briskly back and forth, while customers would feel our hands and arms and bodies. Make us open up our mouths and show our teeth, precisely as a jockey examines a horse which he is about to barter for or purchase. Scars upon a slave's back were considered evidence of a rebellious or unruly spirit and hurt his sale.
90% of all African Americans are slaves. 4 million men, women, and children.
We had based this country on everyone having inalienable rights to freedom and equality, and yet we created a system of abject persecution.
Slaves are fattened for auction, like livestock. Dark-skinned men are bought for the fields, light-skinned women for the house. Traders lie about their ages, even dye a slave's gray hairs.
For the plantation owners, it was like just going to your local supermarket to get sugar or flour. They had become so desensitized to the humanity of the slave that they did not see them as human beings.
Buyers demand the most fertile slaves for breeding. The most expensive are light-skinned teenage virgins. Rape is common. Eliza's from an estate plantation. She's being sold with her 2 children, Emily and Randall. In Louisiana, it's illegal for children under 11 to be taken from their parents.
Boy, come over here.
It happens all the time.
You know, 140 years is not a really long time in the context of history. So it's hard for me to believe that blacks didn't have any rights here. They weren't treated as human beings. They were treated like animals, essentially.
Sir, please.
Right, you go. Measure their business,
Oh, my life.
Over half the sales at auction will tear a family apart.
If you've ever been 8, to think of being separated from your mother and your father and sold and you'll never see them again. The horror of that, the poignancy of all of that, and yet that's the kind of thing that happened across the South up until the end of slavery.
Okay, my final offer. 1,000 for that man. Yeah. 900 for that man. The woman there, $700.
Please, buy my child. Sir!
I have seen mothers kissing for the last time the faces of their dead offspring, but never have I seen such an exhibition of intense grief as when Eliza was parted from her child.
Come on, out. You go.
Election day, ain't it?
Sure is.
John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave. His truth is marching on. He's gonna be a soldier in the army of the Lord. He's gonna be a soldier in the army of the Lord.
We like Republican tickets.
We ain't got those yet. Just the Democrat tickets.
We'll wait.
Might be a pretty long wait.
Let me explain something to you. These men are here to vote. And they mind dying a whole lot less than you do.
Let's see if I can find any.
Some lines you cross. No more warnings. This is war.
Many people don't really know what eugenics is. Eugenics is defined as belief in the possibility of improving the qualities of the human species by discouraging reproduction by persons having genetic defects or presumed to have inheritable, undesirable traits. Essentially, eugenics is the creation of a master race by controlling who has children and who doesn't. An article appearing in the January 31st, 1922 edition of the New York Times bore the headline, "Mrs. Sanger says Superman is the aim of birth control." If creating a race of supermen is the goal, who did Sanger believe had genetic defects or undesirable traits that stood in the way? In his book, Birth Control, Facts and Responsibilities, Adolf Meyer quoted an essay Sanger wrote in 1925, entitled, "The Need of Birth Control in America." Sanger called for the implementation of such programs in the United States specifically targeting African Americans. The following editorial was published in the 1932 issue of the Birth Control Review.
The Negro problem is one of the most complicated and important confronting America. Whatever the ultimate answer may be, such an attitude brings to light the function of birth control as a necessary agency in its solution. The present submerged condition of the Negro is due in large part to the high fertility of the race under disastrously adverse circumstances. Thus, the question arises, to what extent birth control has had a eugenic effect upon the Negro race?
If any question should remain about Sanger's racist agenda, a 1939 letter she wrote to Dr. Clarence Gamble should remove all doubt.
We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is a man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members.
Can there be any wonder why Planned Parenthood opens its facilities in poor inner-city neighborhoods populated by minorities? Can there be any doubt that Sanger's philosophy of creating a pure race is what fuels Planned Parenthood's support of embryonic stem cell research? Margaret Sanger was a racist. She's responsible for the millions of babies that have been ethnically cleansed from our country and should not be celebrated by the taxpayer-funded Smithsonian. Please visit the website and contact the Smithsonian demanding that materials on Sanger be removed from the exhibit.
Can we selectively breed superhumans? You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. Multiple U.S. states passed legislation in favor of forced sterilization, removing criminals, people with mental disorders, specific ethnic groups, and more from the reproductive pool. This nationwide movement had opponents, but they were powerless to stem the tide of support for eugenics. A poll from 1937 indicated that around 2/3 of the U.S. supported sterilization of mental defectives.
I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her. I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her.
Wealthy elite, their fears went beyond things like insurrection. They were worried about the financial impact. Remember, it was not just the cotton plantations that profited from slavery. Whether you're talking about the banks or the insurance companies, the railroads, even the newspapers, the fact is that almost every aspect of the American economy was at some level or another invested in the slave business. You also need to recognize that for the wealthy elitist who controlled the system, slaves were an asset as long as they were slaves. But at the moment they are set free, they become a liability. And what the elite knew was that the end of slavery would instantly release 4 million people into the economy who had been kept uneducated and effectively unemployable anywhere but the cotton field. And what they were concerned about was that this was going to bankrupt the American economy. Taxes were going to go through the roof to take care of these people. Crime was going to be rampant. The prisons were going to be flooded. There was going to be this population overrun. And in the North, the biggest fear was migration from the South of these black people. The other fear that these people had was intermarriage between blacks and whites would lead to a loss of racial purity. The question was, what were they going to do about it? And their initial thought was that they would just send all the slaves back to Africa. This plan was called colonization, and it had broad support among the wealthy elite. In fact, the American Colonization Society was even funded by the United States Congress. But in the end, colonization proved to be unworkable, and the idea was eventually scrapped. But about that same time, a new philosophy was emerging in the world. It was called eugenics, and for some, it seemed like the perfect solution to what had become known as the Negro dilemma.
I do not join in the belief that the African is our equal in brain or in heart. And I believe that if we can, in any fair way, possess ourselves of his services, we have an equal right to utilize them to our advantage. Francis Galton, 1857.
Francis Galton is known as the father of eugenics. He actually coined the phrase eugenics. So he believed in trying to increase those he felt were superior in stock and decrease those he felt were inferior. Francis Galton came from a very wealthy family, a family that made its wealth from the slave trade. And what a lot of people don't know is that Francis Galton was a cousin to Charles Darwin. Francis Galton took Charles Darwin's philosophies and ideas and thoughts, and he actually put them into practice, and that's what we know today as eugenics. Eugenics and evolution are related in that they both see what they consider to be the highest form of primate, such as the gorilla, as almost indistinguishable from what they consider the lowest form of human, the African and the Aborigine.
At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will intervene between man and a more civilized state, and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of as now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. Charles Darwin, 1890.
Charles Darwin is very well known for writing The Origin of Species in the 1800s. This book gave rise to evolutionary theory. What people don't know is that there was actually a longer original title to this book, and that was On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life.
But they would hire crusaders to do the dirty work. And the primary one they settled upon was a woman named Margaret Sanger. She was the founder of the American Birth Control League and the publisher of its newsletter, the Birth Control Review. On a practical level, the relationship between Sanger and these elitists was basically a marriage of convenience. In order to advance their common agendas, they needed a front man and she needed money. And the whole thing would be held together by this kind of bizarre obsession with race and class. The result was that the American Birth Control League became the driving force behind the American eugenics movement. Eugenics would no longer just be a philosophy. Sanger and others like her were going to put it into practice.
We are paying for and even submitting to the dictates of an ever-increasing, unceasingly spawning class of human beings who never should have been born at all. Margaret Sanger, 1922.
The laws of nature require the obliteration of the unfit, and human life is valuable only when it is of use to the community or race. Madison Grant, 1916.
The ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one-world government run by the banking industry, run by the bankers, and they're doing it in sections. The European currency, the euro, and the European Constitution is one part of it. Now they're trying to do it in America with the North American Union, right? And they want to create a new currency called the Amero, right? And the whole agenda is to create a one-world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is getting me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. and all money will be in your chips. And so instead of having cash, anytime you have money in your chip, they can take out whatever they want to take out whenever they want to. If they say you owe us this much money in taxes, they just deduct it out of your chip digitally.
Total control.
Total control. And if you're like me or you, and you're protesting what they're doing, they can just turn off your chip. And you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.
And that chip's connected to a database that has your purchasing records, what you do, what you sell.
Everything is in there, you know? And so they want a one world government controlled by them, everybody being chipped, all your money in those chips, and they control the chips, and they control the people, and you become a slave, you become a serf.
1931, quote, "There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude, and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. And this seems to be the final revolution." Zbigniew Zabrensky worked in the Carter administration, just passed recently. This is from Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era, 1970. The technocratic era involves the gradual appearance of more controlled society.
On August 18th, at the Ramada Hotel in central Jerusalem, leading Israeli rabbis gathered to defend the publication of a book by one of their peers that cited rabbinic sources to justify the killing of non-Jews, including innocent children and families.
לא רק אנחנו הדתיים התנגדנו, גם החילונים, אותם שהם שומרי מסורת, כולם התנגדו לחוק. הסיבה הייתה פשוטה, כולנו אומרים בהגדה של פסח, שפוך חמתך אל הגויים, שלא ידעוך על ממלכות אשר בשמך לא קראו, כי אכל את יעקב ואת נבל ושמו, שפוך עליהם זעמך, חרון אפיך ישיגם, תרדוף באף ותשמידם מתחת שמי השם. שאלנו אותם, אתם לא רוצים להגיד בליל הסדר את ההגדה? יש מישהו שרוצה לעקור את האמירה של התנ"ך, את האמירה של התורה בתורה שבכתב או בתורה שבעל פה?
אני חושב שהכנס הזה והדברים ההגיוניים האלה ייכנסו לאוזניים וללבבות המתאימים, ומה שהיה כאן נקווה שזה חלף ולא נצטרך להתכנס יותר בנושאים מסוג זה. הרב, אם אתם תעשו את העבודה, גם בהלכה יש עניין
What happened here, what this was a chilul kvod haTorah. It was a desecration of the Torah. The Torah is a Torah of peace, Darkei Noam, and what we heard here was that most of the people didn't read the book, and they said what's important is the Atzmaut HaTorah, is that nobody should criticize anybody who writes anything about it, especially if he's a Rav. And what we're saying is we've read the book, we know what the book says. The book calls for killing innocent children. There's no fine distinctions made here. It's a book of racist statements in the name of the Torah.
כחיוב של מסירות נפש, בבחינת יהרג ואל יעבור, לגבי כפייה בניגוד לקיומה של תורה, הוא לא בלבד לגבי גויים שבאים מכפייה נגד קיומה של תורה, אלא הוא עדין גם בכפייה של יהודים, מאיזה צד שהוא. לפני 50 שנה,
But there is such a concept in Jewish law as any population, and under very, very specific circumstances, according to various rabbinic opinions, it would be seemingly permissible to kill children.